And one of our great pleasure, our great delight is to have Deepak coming to speak to us. Deepak is my dear friend and also my teacher. Two things together, that's a wonderful combination. And Deepak is bringing new awareness and new understanding, particularly, perhaps I should mention now, his new book is War of the World Views. And it's a science and spirituality, science versus spirituality, and science and spirituality bringing together. And written this book with Leonard Mlodinov. I can't pronounce his name properly. Deepak will pronounce properly. So this is something that we can look forward to. It will be out in October. And Deepak is going around the world to bring this science and spirituality together. This idea that these are two different worlds and they cannot meet, Deepak is challenging, has been challenging for many years, but this book is going to be a sort of really groundbreaking book. So without much ado, I would like to invite Deepak to speak to us this afternoon. Deepak.
If this is working, because our last session, this was not working. Can you hear me up there clearly? Okay. And how many people were here for the last session? So, you were here for the last session? How many people again? And how many people just came for this session? Okay. Well, the last session was about Tagore, in his relevance of Tagore and his interactions with Einstein, and why Einstein was wrong, even in his science, as far as non-locality was concerned, and Tagore was right, intuitively. And that's, I think, you'll hear more about it as we explore this level that scientists are discovering called non-locality. But Satish asked me for this session to focus on healing. And so that's what I'm going to do in the next 45 minutes or so, explain why healing is real, why there's a scientific biological basis for it, and why we can actually begin to replicate healing once we understand the mechanism. It doesn't mean that we're never going to get sick or never going to die, because you can die and still be healed, which is, of course, what I was reading about earlier when I was reading the poems on death by Tagore. So here we go. My background is in medicine, in neuroscience and neuroendocrinology. And I went to the United States after I finished from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I finished my basic medical degree. And there were two things that happened in my life. Well, there were many things that happened in my life, but two things that are very relevant to what we're going to talk about just now. The first is that any physician will tell you, anybody who's in the field of medicine will tell you, that biological organisms, particularly human beings, do not respond in predictable manner to treatment. So it's something that we assume. You know, medicine is scientific. Medicine is based on reductionist science. Medicine, the brain and the body operate according to the laws of classical mechanics or classical physics. We assume that, but it's not true. Okay. You can have two patients who have exactly the same illness. They get the same treatment. They see the same physician, and they can have completely different outcomes. One person can die. The other person can recover. So that's a common thing. Physicians know about it. They don't talk about it. It's the unexplained phenomenon. It's the X factor. It's the white elephant in the room we don't want to acknowledge, because once we acknowledge, then we have to say what's happening, and then sooner or later we have to get into consciousness. So that's the first thing. The second thing is my own field, neuroscience, neuroendocrinology. This is in the earlier days when radioimmunoassay as a technique had just been developed. And radioimmunoassay is a way in which you can measure molecules in the body. Okay, so in the 70s, this had become very popular because two investigators, one by the name of Rosalind Yalow, had won the Nobel Prize. Now we can measure what's happening in biological systems. And we were measuring what are now well-known chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, opiates. Everybody's heard of these, I presume. And what one of my colleagues at that time, named a woman by the name of Candice Pert, who later on, she was a fellow, research fellow we were all kind of hanging out together. She later went and became the chief of neurochemistry at the National Institutes of Health. And she coined an expression which became relatively popular amongst us, molecules of emotion. So what her basic thesis was that emotional experiences generate molecules, and these molecules are neuropeptides because they're found in the brain, and peptides because they're protein molecules. And that when you feel different emotions, you have different body chemistry. Now that was very interesting to those of us who were interested in consciousness. And so we started looking everywhere in the body for receptors to these molecules. So, the first place obvious to look for was immune cells. Immune cells which go by different names, T cells, B cells, macrophages, etc. If you look at the receptor sites of these little cells, they have receptors to the molecules of emotion. So right now, somebody inside you is having a conversation with themselves. And this is a very interesting conversation because it has emotional overtones, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, whether I fit into your ideology about what is right, wrong, etc. The conversation never shuts up. It is happening right now. It's happening even in your sleep, in your dreams. In a moment, we're going to try and figure out who's this person who never shuts up. But the fact is that the cells of your immune system are responding to this conversation. They're eavesdropping. They're listening to this conversation. What's even more interesting is that the immune cells are not only listening to this conversation, but they are participating in this conversation because they make the same peptides that your brain makes when you're feeling or thinking. If you ask a good neurobiologist today, what's the difference between the immune system and the nervous system, they'll say there really isn't any. The immune system is a circulating nervous system. It has memory. So when your immune cells look at an antigen or an invader, pneumococcus or whatever, they remember, what was my last experience with this fellow. Should I leave him alone? Should I go after him? I have no experience with him, but my grandfather did. So, the memory is passed on, how to make the precise antibody. Not only our immune cells have memory, but they make decisions. So they're conscious cells. Okay? They have consciousness. If that's by consciousness, we mean memory and choices. Sanskara and vasana, or whatever word we want to use. So the immune system is a thinking system.
So are you using samskara as consciousness?
No, as an expression of consciousness. Consciousness is a field of potential. Okay. So, your immune cells are thinking. They just don't think in English with an Indian accent. Now, this happens everywhere you look in the body. We started to look. It was very exciting, So we start looking everywhere because you can measure, and scientists love to measure, so we measured. Okay. Today, if you say, I have a gut feeling about such and such, you're not speaking metaphorically at all. You're speaking literally. Your gut makes the same chemicals that your brain makes when you have emotions or thought. In fact, I would say you can trust your gut feelings a little more because your gut cells haven't yet learned how to doubt their own thinking. Today, we know that 80% of our heart cells, for example, are what some cardiologists or cardiac physiologists call neurocardiocytes. Neuro They're like brain cells, neurons, and they are cardiocytes. They pump blood, but they make the molecules of emotion. Now, I'll cut this story very short because it's a 35-year-old story in development, but your mind is not in your brain, okay? It's everywhere. It's in all the cells of your body, and all the cells of your body are relating to all the cells in two ways. One is local communication through energy and information, local communication. So when I communicate with you on your cell phone, for example, that's a local communication. Or I call you on the phone or through the internet, that's local. It involves energy and information. And there's another kind of communication that occurs. It's called non-local, which I spoke about a little bit earlier, which is almost instantaneous. It's not communication, but it's correlation. Every cell correlates with every other cell instantly. Your body has 100 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Every cell is doing 100,000 activities per second, and every cell tracks and synchronizes with every other cell instantly without sending messages, no signals. Okay? It's what is called non-local correlation, and this is a new field. It's called quantum biology, that biological organisms don't function linearly, they function in an integrated manner. My body is an integrated whole. My brain is an integrated whole, and it's participating with what we call the environment, which is a terrible word. It's the biosphere of which we are an activity. You know, we use these words, body, environment, and we think that's different, but it's actually one system. Okay, it's an integrated system. Those trees are your lungs. The earth is recycling as your body. The rivers and waters are recycling as your circulation. This air is your breath. So why do we call the environment? Okay. We have a personal body, we have an extended body, and they're both equally ours because you can't live with one or the other. Okay. They're equally crucial to our sense of I exist. So everything functions as an integrated system, and this integration is felt to be non-local. There's physics to explain this, okay? But this is how you can explain certain things which were unexplainable before. How does the human body, for example, do so many things simultaneously? Can think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, make a baby all at the same time. And at the same time, your biological rhythms are the symphony of the whole universe. So that's non-local. How does a single cell become the 100 trillion cells only in 50 replications? Only 50 replications to make a whole body. Now, if I had videos, I was telling Satish, we make films on this, and it's very impressive to see what's really happening and the sense of wonder that's evoked when you see what's happening in your body. Okay, so that's non-local correlation. These are the two kinds of things. And the whole thing is being orchestrated through the flow of energy and information, but also non-locally. Beyond the non-locally means outside of space-time. Okay. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that your body is not a structure. First of all, the mind is everywhere, but the second is your body is not a structure. You know, when we think of this, we say this is a structure, right? But even this is not a structure, it's a process. If you go to the level of subatomic particles, this is a very dynamic process right now. But your body is definitely not a structure. It's not a noun, it's a verb. And there's nothing in the universe that's a noun. Nouns are conventions of language. They are not expressions of truth, because there is nothing in the universe that stands still, even for a second. Okay? So your body is dynamic. It's in exchange with all the elements and forces of the universe. And this happens through eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, how we experience the world through our five senses, sound, touch, sight, taste, smell. That's where Ayurveda comes in, because we use these modalities to change biological expression. But then there's a whole